In his book, Think Again, author Adam Grant tells the following story. One afternoon in Maryland in 1983, Daryl Davis arrived to play the piano at a country music lounge. It was not his first time being the only black man in the room. However, before the night was out, it would be his first time having a conversation with a white supremacist. After the show, an older white man in the audience walked up to Daryl and told him that he was astonished to see a black musician play like Jerry Lee Lewis. Daryl replied that actually he and Lewis were friends, and that Lewis even told him that his style was influenced by black musicians. Although the man was skeptical, he invited Daryl to sit for a drink with him. Soon, the man was admitting that he had never had a drink with a black man before. Eventually, he explained to Daryl the reason. He was a member of the KKK. So if you found yourself sitting down with someone who hated you and all of the people like you who shared your skin color, your instinctive options might be fight, flight, or freeze, and rightfully so. But Daryl had a different reaction. He burst out laughing. When the man pulled out his KKK membership card, because apparently those actually exist, to show he wasn't joking, Daryl returned to a question that had been on his mind since he was 10 years old. How can you hate me when you don't even know me? We are all guilty of judging a book by its cover. We can all think of times when we decided not to be friends with somebody before we ever spoke a word to them. We get caught up with the things that catch our eye, the person who looks out of place or who seems a little weird. If we get to know them a little, there are other things that might stop a relationship in its tracks. What happens the first time that we learn someone voted for a different political party than us? Or what about when we find out that someone is Arab or Muslim? Daryl's response was probably very unique. He chose curiosity. He chose to talk to the guy who had been taught to hate him. It's natural to gravitate towards what is familiar. We all tend to be drawn to friendships and relationships with people who are similar to themselves. How many of you moved to Boca Raton because you knew that it had a strong Jewish community? I did. The book of Leviticus commands us, "Ve'ahavta l're'echa kamocha," and you shall love your neighbor as yourself. But there's another way to translate that verse. In Hebrew, this commandment can also be translated that we are to love our neighbors who are like ourselves. And if we only focus on this commandment, our mentality can interfere with our relationships with other people. Either we stay within our own echo chambers, only engaging with people with whom we agree, or we limit our interactions with people who have different opinions. I might have many friends, but if they all think, talk, and act like me, I'm missing out on broadening my world because diverse opinions can make us stronger. The book of Ecclesiastes teaches us, Tovim hashnaim min ha'echad, that two are better than one. That when we collaborate, the sum is usually greater than what we could come up with on our own. And this is why throughout the centuries, rabbis made their students learn in pairs, because we need a chavruta, or a text partner, who can challenge our thoughts and who will disagree with us. For the last year, every other week, I take an hour to study the book of Psalms with my chavruta, my dear friend Daniel. We have moments where we are gentle with each other and help each other to sharpen our Hebrew skills, and other moments when we push back on each other as we grapple with the meaning of the Psalms and our own personal theologies. We also catch up on our personal lives, we talk about our puppies, and we have the type of relationship where we can be honest about our personal and professional lives and give each other advice that we would not be able to hear from most other people. That's where the deep learning happens, when we have people who fully see us and who know us well enough to tell us when we're wrong, who can call us out for our mistakes and still love us at the same time. But with most people, we limit our interactions because we are afraid of what they might think of us. The fact is that we all walk around afraid that someone is going to find out our hidden secrets. We're afraid that they will judge us for our flaws and deficiencies, the pieces of ourselves that make us doubt ourselves and question our self-worth, that are invisible to the human eye, but they're so clear to our inner eye, that we think no one else could possibly understand. Those are the shards of ourself that make us feel the most broken. So we try really hard to suppress them, to ignore them. We hope that no one will notice, including ourselves, because it is so scary to walk around with these vulnerabilities. During my 3rd year of rabbinical school, a classmate of mine nonchalantly asked me if I was an only child. She said I kind of acted like one. When I said no, she was honestly surprised. You see, rabbinical school is a really small school, and we spent all day, every day together. So how come I never brought them up, she asked. The truth was hard. The truth was that as children, my sibling and I used to be best friends. Not kidding. And then, since I was the oldest, I went to college, which was what I was supposed to do, and naturally we drifted a little bit because I went to school 2,000 miles away. 4 years later, I began rabbinical school at the very same time that my sibling was dropping out of college. Their struggles had spiraled, and it made sense for them to move back home. I went to Israel, and we continued growing apart. Over time, I stopped recognizing them, and they stopped recognizing me. I found myself carrying around the grief of losing my best friend. No one saw this pain because I didn't talk about it. And in the age of social media, if you don't have anything good to post, there's no need to post anything at all. For the better part of the last 7 years, I have walked around with a broken heart, thinking that nobody could understand what I'm going through, thinking that my story was too complicated. So I just held it inside and hoped it would go away. I feel a profound sense of loneliness. Sure, I felt torn up inside, hollow where my relationship with my sibling used to live, and fearful for what might come next. At the same time, I wondered if I was making too much of it. After all, my parents were the ones on the front lines, not me. I felt that I had a responsibility to live my life and push on because I was the healthy one. But the reality was that as much as I ignored it, the pain would not go away. I did not think I was entitled to these feelings because I was not the one in the trenches dealing with the rubble that follows in the wake of addiction. In the recovery world, there are 2 branches of fellowship. The first is for the addict, and the second is for those who love them. Al-Anon is for loved ones, and it took me a really long time to try a meeting. I was scared, and I didn't know what to expect. I was searching for community, for people who understood my brokenness and could empathize with my pain. I was looking for a safe place to open up where I could finally let out all that I had been hiding. Broken or not, we are all just looking for people who are willing to see us for who we are, who are willing to love us for exactly who we are, our whole, complete, broken selves. An hour later, someone around the circle read the concluding words that are read at every Al-Anon meeting. After a while, you'll discover that though you may not like us all, you'll love us in a very special way, the same way that we already love you. In that room, for the very first time, I felt seen and loved even with my brokenness. I experienced radical acceptance from a room full of strangers. While we all had something in common that brings us into that room, we are all completely different people. And yet, I have found fellowship and community with people I never would have spoken to outside of the safe room of Al-Anon. I realized that being part of this community might add holiness and wholeness into my life. There is a reason that the Torah teaches us that the pathway to love is holiness, whether it is love of the self, love of each other, or love of the stranger. In the midst of all the purity laws in the book of Leviticus, we are told that if a clay bowl becomes impure, the only way to purify it is to break it. That doesn't make any sense to me. How can something be pure and purified when it's broken? The biblical commentator Chizkuni offers an interesting explanation. He says that clay vessels are cheap and easy enough to replace. So what's the big deal if you have to smash it and start over? But our broken souls, those can't be replaced as easily because unlike a clay pot, each one of us is made B'Tselem Elohim, in the image of God. We learn that the way to purify a broken soul is not to break it, but to love it. We have to learn to love ourselves and each other. It's not simply enough to offer tolerance. What we really need is radical acceptance. We need to look within and be willing to notice and accept every piece of us without judgment so that we can accept who we are the way that we are. Al-Anon is just one example of a community that uses radical acceptance and love to heal broken hearts and broken souls. As Adam Grant finishes telling Daryl's story, he says that having been the target of racism since childhood, Daryl has had a lifetime of very legitimate reasons to harbor animosity towards white people. And still, he was willing to approach the white supremacists with an open mind and give them the opportunity to rethink their views through the power of conversation. When we choose not to engage with people because of our stereotypes or our prejudices or ours, we give up on opening our minds and theirs. Daryl estimates that he has helped upwards of 200 white supremacists rethink their belief and leave the KKK. Many have gone on to educate their family and friends. But Daryl is very quick to point out that he has not persuaded anybody to change their mind. Instead, he says that he gives them reason to think about their direction in life, which he does by beginning a dialogue with thoughtfulness and radical acceptance. Over time, these white supremacists started to see Daryl not as just another black person, but as an individual with whom they have shared interests. And with that kind of nurturing, relationships are then able to flourish. Just as it has been for Daryl, radical acceptance is a lifelong practice. It does not mean that we endorse ideas with which we fundamentally disagree, but it means rejecting the idea, not the person who holds it. If we have the ability to love people who are not completely like us, in fact, those are then the deepest relationships because they might be the people with whom we can have the tough conversations, disagree, and still walk away with mutual love and respect. Then we are able to open ourselves up to living in relationship where we do not have to be afraid to expose our whole selves. Author Brené Brown teaches us that true belonging only happens when we present our authentic, imperfect selves to the world. We can only experience real belonging when it is whole and when it is unconditional. And in order to receive this love and acceptance, we first need to be able to give it. May this year be the one where we begin to embrace radical acceptance of ourselves and others. May we see this brokenness and this pain in everyone, including ourselves, not as a flaw to be ignored, but as a sign of our humanity. I pray that radical acceptance leads to love of ourselves, others, and the Holy One, so that our souls may heal, and that this time next year, we can say that because of the love we gave and the love we received, our souls are a little less broken and our lives a little more whole.